And it's important that we understand that Jesus spoke of love and he spoke of truth. They are not incongruent. This week I shared something online that made some people very uncomfortable because a pastor who's, by the way, a good man. He's a godly man. He loves Jesus. We're going to be in heaven together. And he was wrong when he said that the only reason that Christians are voting for a specific party is because we have been co-opted by the Republican Party who are using us. I don't know if you saw this or not, but he said that he used a talking point that came from Planned Parenthood in the early 80s. Again, I don't think he knew this. I'm not bashing him. He's a Jesus lover, but I'm telling you, in the same way that Paul and Peter, we're reading from Peter, had no small disagreement, this is not a small disagreement. He said that the only reason that Christians are even voting this way is we got co-opted by the Republicans because the Republicans didn't even talk about abortion until the 70s. Roe v. Wade was passed in 1973. Of course they weren't talking about abortion until then. It wasn't the law of the land until then. So to say that, I don't say that so much with anger as I do with a broken heart, to say don't allow the errors of the lawless ones to pull you from your strong position. I did it publicly. Peter and Paul called out Peter publicly. And what I love is here we see at the end of Peter's life, after being called out publicly in the book of Acts by Paul, here's Peter quoting Paul because they came to an agreement not around lie, but around the truth. And as we move into these next few weeks, for those of you that have been uncomfortable with me speaking the way that I've been speaking, I want to say that I don't want to have to talk like this. I just wanted to feed some kids in Haiti, for crying out loud. I didn't want this. If I were going to write a memoir, that's what I want to call it. I just wanted to feed some kids in Haiti. I didn't want any of this. I didn't choose this battle, but the battle chose us. So we either put our sword down and buckle, or we stand a guard and grab our weapon, the Word of God. I'm following the example of my biblical heroes. Moses spoke against Pharaoh. Elijah spoke against Jezebel. John the Baptist spoke against Herod. Even Jesus called Herod a fox. I'm speaking from a history, the Black Robe Regiment. In the days of the Revolutionary War, Shannon and I live in a cabin built in 1794. The Black Robe Regiment were pastors that spoke in courage about the injustices going on in the world. They were pastors. It was William Wilberforce, a pastor, who preached and influenced the end of slavery, a pastor. It was Martin Luther King, a pastor, who spoke to end the injustices against our brothers and sisters who are black in this country, and there have been many over the years. The pastors of today, are we going to speak up for the 65 million children that have been murdered in our country? Now, can I do that in grace and in love? Yes, because truth and love are not incongruent. One of the most loving things I can do is to tell you the truth. And the truth is that the borders that were opened 4 years ago in our country have caused a sex trafficking problem in our nation that is unrivaled. The statistics are incontrovertible. The amount of young women being brought across our borders, this is no longer just happening in the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia. It's happening in Houston. Young women who have been lured across the country by pimps who are now being held hostage in sex trafficking rings in our own nation. Is anybody going to speak in truth and love for them? That same problem is now creating even more abortions in our country, because what's happening with these young women when they are impregnated by evil and wicked men, they're being forced to have abortions. Is anybody going to speak for that? Is anybody going to speak up for the countless young men and women whose body parts are being chopped off in the name of affirming, in the name of wickedness? Is anybody going to speak up for those? Because I tell you, there's a growing number of those young men and women who are now in their teens and early 20s who are furious that they were led down this road by doctors, by pediatricians, by narcissistic parents. Is anybody going to speak for them? It was another pastor named Martin Niemöller, because many of you are saying, why do I want to talk about this? It's not my problem. You may not say it that way, but some of my comments online, some of my private messages on social media were like, why do you have to do this? Why are you even calling out other pastors? And here's why. Niemöller said this: first, they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Niemöller would eventually die in a concentration camp after spending 13 years there in Nazi Germany. I don't know what the future is of our nation, but I know this: I'm not waiting until they come for me before I talk and speak on behalf of those unborn children. And I pray that you'll do the same.